Hi everybody, you're with Tacitus Today on your Pushback channel, and thank you for watching. So let's do some pushing back towards those lies and propaganda and disinformation that is the cultural Marxist SJW left. And while you're with us, please take a moment to subscribe below. This video essay addresses the concerns that many of us have about the male violence and rape against women epidemics that are alleged to be omnipresent in the advanced Western economies of today. As government gender policy is driven and framed based on the statistics of alleged rape and violent assault against women, it is more than reasonable to ask if the statistics are reliable or even remotely accurate. The dualist patriarchy model is an ideological framework through which radical feminist activists perceive all male-female interactions, which are uniformly predetermined as violent and oppressive. The dualist model has been hungrily embraced and has decisively influenced all the English-speaking democracies in terms of governmental policy approach and remedies. The primary concern many of us have is how these false statistics and invented epidemics of female victimhood are used or have become cover for politicians to undermine the very basis of Western jurisprudence and due legal process. No matter the reason, once we as a society cease to protect or allow the watering down of due legal process based on group demonisation and alleged moral panic, then we are all exposed and our society devalued accordingly. If we protect due legal process, we are all protected. In a democratic rule of law society, a due legal process is where all roads meet. Let's say you're accused of robbing, as in stick 'em up, the local bank. Now, it turns out you were nowhere near the bank at the time of the robbery or at any time near the bank in those days or those times, and you have 10 witnesses and a plane ticket to prove it. The issue attracts a lot of press as the perpetrator allegedly said something unfavourable, say about transgender bathrooms or some other flavour of the moment issue. And it's gone international and viral. Responding to the seething outrage of the Twitter sphere, the police are keen to make an arrest. A social media post from years ago has been found where you make a pretty innocuous joke about transgender bathrooms. It's all the police need and you're arrested. You are somewhat put out at being arrested, spending the night in a cell, but you have nothing really to fear because your evidence is so compelling. So you front in court. The judge warns you as to the seriousness of the allegation, which could mean 15 years in a maximum security prison if found guilty for robbing this bank. Moreover, should a person who does not support transgender bathrooms have or be allowed to have legal rights? The thought of prison terrifies you, and the terror moves across you like a cold, dark shadow, and your knees feel weak. You steady yourself. Your plane tickets are tendered as evidence, your 10 witnesses have filed depositions and are outside the court waiting to be called to give evidence under oath. You're feeling not so bad. The administrative preliminaries are dealt with, a witness is called. They say it might or could have been you in the bank. They're not really sure, but remarkably the judge leads the witness asking, "Are you sure this is not the person you saw robbing the bank?" "Absolutely sure." The witness hesitates. "I am satisfied the witness has not ruled you out," says the judge. Your jaw drops. What is happening? This cannot be happening, you say to yourself. But you're not going to take this lying down and try to cross-examine the witness. But suddenly the judge calls a recess and excuses the witness before you have time to cross-examine them. The judge will only recall that witness if you pay a bond in advance, which you could not afford. The judge is actively preventing you from cross-examining what the court has arbitrarily declared to be a key witness. You point to the 10 depositions. The judge refuses to accept them, but is vague as to why. You ask for your witnesses to give evidence under oath, but the judge will not grant leave to call the witnesses. With heavy heart, you ask your witnesses to come back tomorrow. An hour later, barely an hour later, the judge asks if your witnesses have gone for the day. You say they have. Then the judge suddenly says he will now hear the witnesses, but it's only now or never at all. You are dumbstruck. The plane tickets. You still have the plane tickets. But the judge pretends that he cannot read the plane tickets. As you have no evidence to rebut the state's accusations, the judge has disallowed all your evidence. You are sent to prison for 15 years. An appeal is very expensive. You cannot afford it. You read through the judge's findings and reasons. The plane ticket is declared as illegible and the witness was not examined and they were described as unreliable, all 10 witnesses. The court recording has somehow been technically compromised and is inaudible. So what just happened here? Due legal process and the rules of evidence were not followed or applied. The key issues were the reversing the burden of proof, where the accused must prove their innocence no matter how flimsy the accusation, setting a low bar of evidentiary standards for the accusers while forcing a very high bar of evidence for the accused, legal chicanery and tactics in the court that involve hampering and obstructing production of evidence for the accused while assisting, if not leading evidence for the accuser, permitting unrestricted witness examination and cross-examination for the accuser while administratively preventing the same witness access to the accused. You may say such a thing could never happen in a Western court of law in a democratic society, but think again. This vignette is gleaned from actual event in Western courtrooms. Increasingly, newly invented social justice and social equity crimes are being tried in front of committee-style star chambers with names that always include virtue signalling terms such as human rights and committees for justice or committees for equality. A government and NGO publicity machine acts on an unsupported allegation that is often pure invention, yet the accuser, as long as they wrap themselves in a cloak of minority victimhood, need only make an allegation and the taxpayer-funded state machine takes over with full coordinated media support. Any government trying to re-engineer any society must use the courts as its final solution, and it cannot do this without taking control of the courts, and to do this it must dispense with due legal process while leaving the external trappings of legal procedure in place just for show. It can't happen? Who would have thought newspapers that 20 years ago were the journals of record now just vomit clickbait propaganda? Lawyers and judges can become activists without turning a hair. We've already seen too much of that, so don't think the anointed custodians of law will protect due legal process. It's up to the citizenry to demand it. It really doesn't matter where in history you care to look. The Inquisition, the French Revolutionary Courts, the Committees for Public Safety in the French Revolution, the Nazi People's Court, the Soviet show trials, the Chinese People's Cultural Street Courts, Pol Pot's Communist Children's Courts. Due legal process is always the obstacle they must first pass before they can directly attack the citizenry or any section of it. Protect due legal process, and no matter what the temptations to do otherwise, we are all protected. Once as a society we dispense with due legal process, it is out of the bottle. It's very hard to put back in. Public demonisation and in courts without due legal process and a corrupted fourth estate is all it takes for any society to be on a short route to disaster. If you have any takeaway from this video, it must be that. Protect due legal process. Today, white middle-class straight men are the demonised group, and why not? Aren't we told on a daily basis that white middle-class men are wife-beating, rapist, child-abusing, bigoted, racist Nazis? But tomorrow it could be any other group. It could easily be black, lesbian, legal aid lawyers. With no due legal process, any group can become targeted and easily. Men are so bad, so the propaganda tells us, that they barely deserve legal rights. An unproven, untested, corroborated allegation is today enough to get a man fired from their jobs, kicked out of a university, have his freedoms of movement controlled and limited, or arbitrarily detained by the state. Let this sink in. Protecting women is the cover story of choice by Western governments to weaponise the suspending of due legal process, which is a cornerstone of Western rule of law democracy. The reasoning used is that a higher purpose takes priority, vaguely referred to as making women feel safe or protecting children. Do any of us really want codified laws overturned because we want to make someone feel safe? Nearly all statistics in this super politicised area of rape and violent assault are either conducted by strident feminist activists or paid for by feminist activist groups, using your taxpayer dollars, by the way. As these are not independent studies, it is appropriate, if not a duty, for all of us to be sceptical of the alleged statistics. Screaming media headlines combined with a natural media sympathy for leftist activist groups result in claims of 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 women being beaten and raped, and they are tended to be dramatic. But are these assertions true or even remotely accurate? Or to put a finer point on it, are these fanciful claims nothing more than grotesque untruths? The methodology used by the gender studies types that pump out this propaganda is to decide on an outcome, that being all men are rapists and batterers, and then to reverse engineer a cherry-picked or invented causation scenario. This approach, of course, produces a predetermined outcome of male wickedness, which is the whole point of the propaganda and the disinformation in the first place. Feminist academics contend facts and the merits of information are irrelevant. Facts are a male construct and part of the evil patriarchy. Accordingly, all studies supporting the theory of an epidemic of violence against women are created and constructed from a radical feminist, fact-free perspective, which unsurprisingly gets the same overall result every time they do a study. With so much politicised rape and violence propaganda out in the public domain, do we even know what the real numbers might be? Is it an epidemic, as is fancifully claimed, or is it somewhat rare, far more nuanced than a straight gender issue, and totally confined to the poorest few percent of the population? Like all propaganda, if no one in government or mainstream media questions the lies and exaggerations, they can become fact, as their endless repeating gradually erodes the meaning or relevance of accuracy and fact. So what is the reality of so-called gender violence? Well, we've done the heavy lifting, so let's provide some starting context. We gathered what studies we could find, all of which suggested Western rape and violent assault of women by white men was at epidemic proportions, like off the charts. It is an everywhere epidemic, we are told, in every house, every workplace, every street. If we add some of the more fanciful propaganda statistics together, femi activists would have us believe Western middle-class women are assaulted and raped at least once every few weeks. Western universities are alleged to be so dangerous for women that even frontline war zone combat would be a haven of safety by comparison. All of these claims of violence just seem rather improbable, don't they? None of us seem to know anyone who suffered this violence, so maybe it's just everyone we don't know. So let's have a closer look. The first problem we came across was the studies, if you could call them that. They'd all been conducted by strident femi activists and peer-reviewed by other femi activists who busily cross-quote and falsely legitimise each other's studies in a round robin of providing an authenticating veneer to each claim of violence. All of these we found to be fabrications and falsehoods. Not a single statistic in any politicised study could withstand scrutiny. It was all lies. When contacted, the academic authors, and if you could call them academics, authors of these studies were defensively reluctant to provide the raw study data and were quite clearly not used to having their activities questioned. And approaches by the media and government and political operatives seem to never question the findings of these so-called studies. That someone might question their findings was so foreign to them they didn't seem to know what to do. I even wondered, was I the only person that had called them to question their shining lies that they peddle? But why is no one asking questions about the information, which is obviously false, and it's pivotal to the manufactured social conflict of our times, and the equally false yet intrusive remedies the body politic practices and preaches? Where they did supply some or all of the alleged study data, the breathtaking extent of the propaganda and lying became obvious within the first few minutes of reading. Nor was it difficult to spot. Just about anyone could have seen it. A high school kid could notice it. The stats are obviously fake or just contrived as fake, but none of the mainstream commentary say so. Why not? Outright fabrication, chronic exaggeration, as well as bait and switch are the primary methods of taxpayer-funded or tax-exempt feminist deception. One study put out by a prominent NGO dramatically claiming a pandemic of rape and violence against women was an anecdotal report conducted by SJW NGO activists in a dirt-poor region of Africa going through a vicious tribal civil war. The problem was that this was falsely reported as being widespread violence not in Africa or in a war-torn area, but in the big cities of Canada, Britain and Australia. The media outlets knew this was pure SJW femi propaganda, but they reported it anyway, even gave it star billing and actively worked to conceal the reality from the public of it being a flaky African study cooked up by a bunch of activists. Why is the media trying so very, very hard to deceive in this way? One study, another taxpayer-funded study with your money, had reviewed a self-selected group of impoverished women in one of the poorest, most crime-ridden areas in a Western nation. Many of the women were intellectually challenged single mothers, procreating from an early age, some with as many as 6 children by the age of 25. And they also had serious drug and alcohol abuse issues. These people were about as far from a representative population sample as could be found. Why use such subjects in a study, and then why pass it off as all being a nationwide survey of middle-class women, which it clearly was not? The intention to corrupt was also in place from the outset. The researchers employed to interview the women were all radicalised gender studies students, a course that many of you already know teaches intense hatred of white heterosexual men. They were instructed to treat every claim of male wrongdoing as fact, even though there was no evidence. Moreover, social workers, many of whom were also current and former women's studies students, shepherded along interview candidates who they had selected and coached in victim ideology utterances and statements. It was hardly a meaningful study or sample. The definition of rape and assault as used by these researchers and conducted with the sole intention of producing propaganda was exceptionally broad and laced with feminine ideology, and is fancifully expanded each year to include the weirdest items. Looking at someone is now classified as assault, as is turning away from them. The most prominent and widely used feminist definition of violence is any act by men that could or may cause physical, sexual, financial, emotional, psychological suffering or fear of suffering to women. Fear of suffering. These absurdly broad catch-all definitions are not mentioned by our media or political class when reporting alleged violent statistics. So the term assault or violence is assumed by an unsuspecting public to mean just that, a direct act of physical violence or assault or threat of it, when in reality it often means nothing more than the hurt feelings of a very fragile individual with mental health issues who may have forgotten to take their meds. By using such a vague definition, almost any human interaction could be described as violence. Words are bestowed with a form of symbolic, moral, emotional power that subverts and perverts their actual definition. Thus it can be that the same word is in two ideological languages conveying two completely separate meanings. Among the favourite propaganda deceptions used, and we saw this repeatedly, are to manufacture a report in the highest crime postcode in the nation, as mentioned above. Throw in some serious exaggeration to really give it some extra oomph, and then say the report is a national average of rape and violence across all cities and suburbs and classes, from shining sea to shining sea. Also keep in mind, no proof's ever required in these studies. Any allegation made, and in many cases the SJW defined victim attendees received gifts for turning up for interviews. It also came to light that intellectually challenged women with drug dependency form an unusually high proportion of those who make rape allegations. While many of these women make multiple rape allegations, they are disingenuously reported as separate rape cases, and all allegations are treated as fact. Yet crime rates in super crime-ridden areas taken in by these so-called studies are almost 50 times higher than the national average. Violent assault is almost 70 times higher than the national average. Is it not therefore reasonable to assume crimes such as rape and assault are also about 50 times more likely to occur in these areas, indeed if they occur, in anywhere near the numbers claimed, than they would in any other area? Why omit this critical context and data from any report and the subsequent media hyping? Why would anyone want to omit such key information? The overall amount of crime is unique to these crime-ridden areas and the similarly unique poor socioeconomic conditions of the area. Why not say that in the report and the media coverage? Why pretend it's otherwise? Not only do the media not question any of these key points in this and other very shoddy and duplicitous studies, it even headlines the false findings with invented hyperbole and hysterical moral outrage. Politicians join in, positioning themselves and the state as the avenging angel protectors of all women. The politicians even have their speeches prepared in advance of the propaganda media release. They know the reports are coming out, they know they'll get headline coverage, and they're ready with their confected outrage, their bombast and their spittle. Another study was conducted in a rural indigenous tribal area where again poverty, unemployment along with substance abuse and crimes of all sorts were and are widespread. The same deeply flawed and intentionally deceptive formula for conducting the study was applied. A bunch of taxpayer-funded feminist activists arrive using a questionnaire that guarantees a predetermined outcome and interview a group of aggrieved women, many again with mental health and substance abuse issues, which are hand-picked by other feminist activists. These studies have no rigour, they have no facts, they have no proof. Yet again, the media does not question the hysterical propaganda that uses the flim-flam study to scientifically legitimise these blatant falsehoods. Screaming inflammatory headlines appear across the entire media landscape, and politicians who know full well it's all a pack of lies lap it up, promote it and spew indignation every bit as made up as the statistics they disingenuously quote. The violence and rape against women by men in Western countries is obviously a cooked-up fantasy, but the implication for Western jurisprudence flowing from the propaganda bandwagon are sinister in the extreme. As mentioned above, for example, men can be arbitrarily detained or have movement restrictions placed upon them, can be evicted from university courses, fired from a job, all based on unproven allegations made by mentally disturbed women without even a minimum of evidentiary standards. I mean, just stop for a moment. Is this something we really want? It is not women who are being assaulted, but rather it is our Western democratic legal system that is under assault. Due legal process is a precious commodity. Any society that allows it to be dismantled is on a slippery slope. As the feminist propaganda asserts, we are in an epidemic of violence against women. The gender studies academics say so. And who can argue with the moral need to bend a few laws and jail a few innocent people? Like, are you a rape apologist Nazi or something? And anyway, it's all for the greater good. These things are always for the greater good. So, ask the questions. If violence against women by men is so pervasive, why are strident men-hating activists with sham studies and deeply flawed methodologies needed to prove it? Why are so many propaganda devices used, such as exaggerations of instances of assault, and exaggerating by as much as 70 times, and a long list of pure inventions used to pretend it is a problem experienced by most or all women in the West all of the time? It's obviously not so. Therefore, why so much taxpayer-funded effort in saying it is? If instances of violence against women are so widespread, exaggerations and fabrications would not be needed. The facts would speak for themselves. But there are no facts, so why the inventions? Why manufacture a problem backed up by a monumental taxpayer-funded propaganda campaign, all paid for with your taxpayer dollars, that barely exists outside of the poorest 5% of the community, most of whom have substance abuse, mental health challenges, and deeply entrenched behaviours of mutual violence? We assess that more middle-class women will die from choking on sandwiches than from male violence. More Western middle-class women will win a major prize in the lotto than will be assaulted by their partner. More than 80% of all partner-related injuries experienced by Western women will be in mutual violence situations. Why do we not hear this narrative from our politicians and our mainstream media? Why not? Why are your taxpayer dollars being used to promote such gender conflict and social division based on lies and rampant misinformation? If violence against women is a widespread issue, then a completely independent apolitical study conducted to the highest standards of academic rigour will discover it. Why does no such reference study exist? Why do the wildest claims of a violence epidemic come from those who rely on the most flaky and flimsiest of fake research? We live in times where, if not you, the people, who will ask the questions? This is Tacitus Today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.